They called me the clean cop of Cavite. Not because I was pure, no one in our precinct really was, but because I smiled like I believed in the uniform. When I first joined the force, I was 24 and stupidly proud. The academy had taught me how to shoot, how to salute, how to write reports that made mistakes disappear. What it didn't teach me was silence, the kind that follows every lie you tell in uniform. My name is Rafael Raffy Mendez, son of a tricycle driver and a church volunteer. I grew up in a squatter's area that smelled like fried fish and gasoline. My mother sold flowers outside the cemetery. My father used to say, "The city respects no one, hijo, unless you wear a badge or own a gun." So I chose the badge. I wanted to lift my family from the kind of life where dinner depended on my father's mood and the price of diesel. I wanted to wear something people wouldn't laugh at. Every morning in the academy, I polished my boots until I could see the ceiling lights tremble on the leather. I mistook reflection for honor. When I graduated, I was assigned to a precinct near Manila Bay, corruption's shoreline. It was the kind of place where the coffee tasted like favors, and the evidence room smelled like money wrapped in plastic. My senior officer, Inspector Delos Reyes, taught me how the world really worked. "Raffy, people don't want heroes," he said once, stirring his whiskey in a paper cup. "They want headlines. Give them drama, give them villains. The rest? That's paperwork." He smiled as he passed me my first bonus, a crisp envelope after a night raid on a gambling den. I didn't ask where it came from. I told myself it was part of the system, that even saints had to eat. I kept telling myself that. The first few years were a blur of arrests, promotions, and half-truths. I became the precinct's poster boy, young, articulate, photogenic in uniform. The local press loved me. I gave sound bites about justice, smiled beside confiscated drugs, and handed bouquets to victims' families. But behind the smiles was a quiet desperation. To matter, to be seen. My mother died of a stroke the same year I got promoted to sergeant. She never saw the new house I bought her, or the polished gate that bore our family name in gold letters. At her funeral, I placed my badge beside her photograph for a second. The priest called it a symbol of duty. I called it a mask. That night, I couldn't sleep. I told myself I was doing everything right, keeping the streets safe, arresting criminals, feeding my family. Yet I couldn't shake the sense that my mother's eyes, closed and calm in the coffin, were still watching me, waiting for something honest. When the war on drugs intensified, our precinct became a stage. Every night was an episode, every dawn a photo op. The mayor wanted results, the chief wanted media. We wanted survival. I was chosen to lead a major bust in Parañaque. My team was exhausted, underpaid, and half cynical. But the operation was announced even before it happened. News crews already on standby, politicians rehearsing lines about swift justice. The plan was simple. Fake it. We had seized old evidence months ago, half a kilo of meth, a few firearms, cash bundles for show. The suspects were paid informants who'd surrender on camera. I told myself it was harmless. No bullets, no casualties, just spectacle. Still, something inside me twitched. Maybe guilt, maybe memory. but I silenced it with the thought of another promotion, another envelope, another evening where I didn't have to feel small. That's when the hunger began. The hunger for recognition. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about applause, the intoxicating sound of validation echoing louder than conscience. Every cop in Manila learns early that the line between justice and theater is thin. The first time I crossed it, no one noticed. The second time, they cheered. At the press conference, I stood in front of the cameras, holding a confiscated pistol like a trophy. Behind me, the chief smiled wide for the journalists. The mayor shook my hand, whispering, "You'll go far, Mendez." People love heroes. Heroes. The word echoed like a warning shot. That night, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The crisp uniform, the metal glinting on my chest, the hollow eyes. My father called to congratulate me. He said the neighbors were watching me on TV. "See, hijo? The city respects you now." I smiled, pretending to believe it. But beneath the applause, I heard something else. A faint echo. A gun cocking in the distance of my memory. It wasn't guilt yet. It was the beginning of it. The first time I heard my name on national television, I felt my heartbeat synchronize with the applause. Sergeant Rafael Mendez, the man behind the city's most successful drug operation. That line became my brand. My photo in the newspaper, my grin under the headline, "The New Face of Discipline." The irony was delicious and sickening at once. Soon, reporters began calling me Sir Raffy. Politicians began shaking my hand, and the precinct started calling me the poster boy. I'd walk past the station bulletin board and see my face pinned between crime scene photos and wanted posters. I was proud. Too proud. Every good man in this city wants to be respected. But respect in the Philippines is a hungry beast. It eats until you disappear. After the staged raid, the chief pulled me into his office. The air smelled of cheap tobacco and ambition. He locked the door. "Raffy," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You made the station look good. The mayor wants a follow-up. Another operation? Another success, you understand?" I nodded, though my stomach twisted. He tossed a brown envelope onto the desk. Inside were stacks of pesos, thick enough to pay for 2 months' rent or 1 month's silence. "For your initiative," he said. "You're a loyal man, right?" I hesitated for half a second, long enough to betray myself. He noticed. "Loyalty isn't about honesty," he added softly. "It's about order. The people need stories, not saints." That night, I held the envelope like a mirror, seeing my reflection split into two. The boy who once believed in justice, and the man who believed in promotion. The next few weeks became a parade of deception. We faked more raids. Sometimes we planted old weapons. Sometimes we recycled evidence from previous arrests. Every photo op felt like a movie scene. The flashing lights, the shouts of "Move, police!" the smell of sweat and dust. Even the cries of the suspects, paid addicts who'd kneel in front of cameras, became part of the soundtrack. One of them, a boy barely 18, looked at me once and whispered, "Sir, will this make me famous?" His eyes were dry, resigned. I didn't answer. Then came Lara, a journalist from the Morning Tribune. She was sharp, ambitious, with eyes that seemed to cut through pretense. She followed me after one of the raids, notebook in hand, asking how it felt to save the city. I told her what I told everyone. We're just doing our duty. But she saw through it. Weeks later, we met again, this time at a cafe by the pier. She said she wanted to write a profile piece on me. I said yes, flattered, pretending not to care. Her voice was gentle but probing. You smile a lot on camera, Raffy. But you look tired off it. Why? Because cameras lie, I said, and so do I. She laughed, but not unkindly. There was something dangerous about her curiosity. It felt like forgiveness disguised as seduction. After that, we started seeing each other outside of work. She became my secret audience, the only person who seemed to see the rot beneath the metal. When she kissed me, it felt like confession. When she stopped asking questions, it felt like trust. I told myself she was different, that I was different with her. But I was still lying, just softer now. The higher I climbed, the more unreal it became. Politicians invited me to banquets. I toasted beside them, wearing the same uniform I once polished for my mother's pride. They called me the model of modern policing. Every time they said it, I felt the same chill, like the word model meant prop. One senator handed me a sealed envelope after dinner. Use it wisely, he said. You're one of us now. That phrase, one of us, sealed my fate. Because once you belong to them, truth stops being useful. Lara began to notice the cracks. She'd ask subtle questions about the inconsistencies in my reports, about the evidence logs that didn't match. You're faking these, aren't you? She whispered once, late at night. I froze. She looked at me with those eyes, part fury, part compassion. You think you're saving people, she said, but you're saving your pride. I tried to explain it, the pressure, the expectations, the dirty hierarchy that rewarded deception and punished honesty. She didn't flinch. Then quit, she said, before this eats you alive. But I couldn't. Not after everything I'd built, the name, the image, the illusion. I told her she wouldn't understand. She told me I was afraid. And she was right. The temptation wasn't just power. It was control. For the first time in my life, I could rewrite the story, decide who was guilty, who was heroic. I became addicted to the narrative. The chief would call, and I'd orchestrate another victory. The press would print it. The city would cheer. But the applause began to sound different, louder, harsher, like echoes in a metal drum. And then one night, during the biggest staged raid of my career, the sound became something else entirely. We set up the scene in a rundown apartment complex in Makati. The suspects were two hired extras, drug users paid enough to act scared but not resist. Cameras outside, reporters ready. I remember the sweat trickling down my spine as I shouted, "Police, drop your weapon!" The flashbulbs fired like lightning. My finger rested on the trigger for effect. Then, a real gunshot cracked the air. One of my men, new recruit, nervous as hell, had fired for realism. The bullet hit the younger suspect in the chest. He fell. For a moment, everyone froze. Even the cameras hesitated. Then the chief yelled, "Keep rolling!" Clean this up. Clean this up. A life had just ended, and the phrase they used was a mop order. I stared at the boy's body, his shirt blooming red, his eyes wide, confused. He looked like the kid who once asked me if this would make him famous. It did, for the wrong reason. We covered it up, of course. The report said the suspect fired first. The mayor called me courageous. The news headline read, "Officer Mendez leads lethal operation against drug lords." Lethal. They liked that word. It sold well. That night, Laura called me. She'd seen the footage, the body. "He wasn't armed," she said. "I checked the photos." "Don't," I whispered. "Please." "You killed him, Raffy." "It was an accident." "Then tell the truth." But I didn't, because by then, the truth was no longer mine. Days passed. The applause grew louder. Promotions came faster. I was now Captain Mendez. But every time the cameras flashed, I saw the boy's face. Every time the politicians clapped, I heard the gunshot. Sleep became a battlefield. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the word lethal echoing like a curse. My father visited once, proud as ever. He saluted me playfully. "See, hijo? You made it." I smiled. But when he left, I vomited in the sink. I stopped seeing Laura. She stopped calling. Her last message read, "When they cheer for you, remember who's missing in the photo." I deleted it, but it stayed anyway, somewhere between my conscience and my lungs. In the precinct, we celebrated our success. Whiskey poured, laughter erupted, medals pinned. The chief raised his glass. "To heroes!" I drank, but the taste was metal, not victory. The night after the promotion, Manila glowed like an open wound. The streets pulsed with heat and neon. The bars along Burgos Street throbbed with laughter, perfume, and music that didn't care who died today. Inside one of them, a dim, smoky place called the Blue Orchid, we celebrated the way only guilty men know how, by pretending we weren't. The chief sat beside me, his arm heavy on my shoulder. "You earned this, Raffy," he said, eyes glazed. "You gave the people a story. That's worth more than truth." I nodded, glass raised, the whiskey burning like absolution. Around us, the other officers drank, shouted, flirted. The night was alive, almost mocking. There was a girl on stage, singing a slow, sultry version of Anak. Her voice was soft, but every lyric felt like a verdict. "Ang anak na di marunong magpatawad," a child who cannot forgive. I laughed to drown it out, but laughter didn't work the way it used to. As the months blurred, I began to master the rhythm of deception. Press conference, raid, photo op, whiskey. Repeat. I was addicted to the choreography. The sound of cameras clicking had become my new heartbeat. Politicians smiled beside me. Corporations donated. Schools invited me to inspire the youth. I gave speeches about integrity while my hands still smelled of gunpowder and lies. Money started to flow, quietly, smoothly. New car, new condo, new Rolex. I told myself it was payment for sleepless nights, for the risks I took. But deep down, I knew it was tribute, for feeding the illusion. My men followed my lead. Some bought motorcycles, others gambled their bonuses away. One night, a junior officer, Morales, pulled me aside, grinning. "Sir, next time, can I do the firing shot?" I stared at him. His grin faltered. That was when I realized I had become the system's virus, infecting others with my own disease. I began frequenting the Blue Orchid after every operation. There was comfort in its decay, dim lights, slow jazz, and women who never asked questions. One of them, Mia, became a regular presence at my table. She was in her late 20s, sharp-tongued and tired-looking, with a beauty that refused to apologize. "You cops drink like you're trying to erase something," she said one night. "Maybe we are." "Does it work?" "Only until sunrise." She smirked, poured me another shot. "Then you'll need a lot of sunrises." We didn't talk about love. We didn't even talk about guilt. We just shared silence, the kind that comes from knowing you're both pretending to live. One night, after too many drinks, I asked her if she believed in redemption. "Redemption?" She lit a cigarette. "Only if you die early." "And if you don't?" "Then you keep paying for it." Every day her words stung more than the alcohol. When I got home, I stared at myself in the mirror again. The uniform hanging on the wall looked like it belonged to someone else. I thought of my mother's voice. "Be kind, hijo. Even power can pray." But I no longer knew how to pray. Weeks later, Laura's article came out. Not about me, but about the system. She wrote about corruption, staged raids, fabricated heroes. No names, but enough hints for anyone paying attention. The precinct panicked. The chief called an emergency meeting. "We need a scapegoat," he barked. "Someone they can sacrifice." His eyes landed on me. The room went quiet. "Not me," I said. "You know I followed orders." "Exactly," he smiled thinly. "That's what makes you believable." For the first time, fear outweighed pride. That night, I went to Mia's bar again. The TV was playing the evening news. My own face, on screen, framed by the headline, "Hero Cop Under Investigation." The crowd clapped. They thought it was another performance. I finished my drink in silence. "You knew this would happen," Mia said softly. "I thought I could handle it." "You thought you could control it." She leaned closer. "But the story always eats the storyteller." I wanted to believe she was wrong. But the truth was, she was the only one left who didn't lie to me. Days later, they cleared me. A few favors, some missing files, a staged testimony, same formula. My hero status was restored. But something inside me had cracked. Not shattered yet, but fractured enough to hum in every silence. The city still applauded me. The cameras still followed me. But now, every flash burned. I started drinking in the mornings. It helped me function. It helped me forget. The raids grew bloodier. The line between fake and real blurred until I couldn't tell the difference anymore. There were times when my men fired for effect, and I didn't stop them. Times when we kicked in doors just to fill a quota. Times when we shot shadows and called them criminals. Each report read the same. Suspect resisted arrest. Lethal engagement justified. But behind every comma was a soul I'd deleted. One evening, Laura appeared at the precinct gate. She looked thinner, colder. "You're dying in slow motion," she said. "Maybe I deserve to." No one deserves to rot like this. She handed me a folder, photographs, transcripts, copies of reports I'd altered. They're reopening the case, she said. The boy you killed. The words hit harder than any bullet. I didn't even ask how she got them. Tell the truth, she pleaded. It's not too late. But it was. It had been too late since the first staged shot. That night, I went to the Blue Orchid one last time. Mia wasn't there. The lights were dimmer, the singer was gone. Only the echo of the song remained. Ang anak na di marunong magpatawad. I sat alone at my table, the world spinning slow. I reached for my badge. It felt heavier than metal, like it carried every body, every lie, every silence. For a second, I thought about pulling the trigger on myself. One final gunshot to drown the applause. But I couldn't. Cowardice had become my only surviving instinct. At dawn, I stood by the pier and watched the sun rise over Manila Bay. The water shimmered like stained glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel proud or powerful. Just empty. That's when I understood what Mia meant. The story eats the storyteller. I wasn't the hero anymore. I wasn't even the villain. I was just the echo. The morning they called me in for questioning, the city was drenched in rain. Not the kind that cleans, the kind that drowns. I sat in the back of the police van, watching the blurred lights smear across the windshield. Every drop sounded like a countdown. The chief didn't speak. None of them did. Silence had replaced loyalty. By the time we reached headquarters, the cameras were already waiting. Microphones thrust through the rain, flashes blinding me, questions slicing through the air. Captain Mendez! Did you falsify the report? Is it true the suspect was unarmed? Do you regret your actions? I smiled the way I'd been trained to. Calm, detached, rehearsed. But inside, my stomach was a fist. For the first time, the applause was gone. Only the sound of rain. Relentless, accusing. Inside the interrogation room, everything smelled of rust and coffee gone cold. The walls were bare except for the flag and a framed quote about integrity. They asked their questions with the same politeness as murderers. Each file laid open on the table. My handwriting, my signature, my sins. Captain, the investigator said, tapping the papers. This statement, did you write it? Yes. Then who ordered the shot? No one did. It was an accident. But you falsified the report afterward? I did what I was told. He leaned forward, eyes narrow. Told by who? I almost said it. The chief's name, the mayor's, everyone who had feasted on the myth I built. But my throat refused. Because deep down I knew. The system wasn't one man. It was all of us. No one, I whispered. Just me. They suspended me that afternoon. No press conference, no ceremony. Just a quiet memo and a handshake that meant you're finished. The same people who had toasted my name now avoided my eyes. The officers who once called me sir now spoke of me in past tense. Sayang si Mendez, I overheard one whisper. He could have been chief. Could have been. Past tense. Like a death notice. I went home to my condo. Empty, silent, still smelling of whiskey and stale perfume. On the table sat my badge, my gun, and a stack of unopened letters from Lara. I didn't open them. I couldn't bear to. Instead, I turned on the TV. The evening news showed footage of me smiling at press conferences, shaking hands, posing with confiscated guns. A highlight reel of hypocrisy. The anchor's voice was calm, almost pitying. Once hailed as the face of justice, Captain Mendez now faces charges of falsification and misconduct. The word justice cut deeper than charges. I turned off the TV and stared at the dark screen. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, uniformless, stripped of performance. For the first time, I saw the man I'd been hiding behind applause. Days turned to weeks. My phone stopped ringing. Even my father stopped calling. I'd visit my mother's grave sometimes, though I always went late at night, when no one could see the fallen idol talking to ghosts. Ma, I'd whisper, I wanted to make you proud. The wind didn't answer. I wanted to fix everything. But the city, it doesn't let you fix. It only lets you fake. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, a church bell rang. I laughed bitterly. Even God must be tired of hearing my name. One evening, Lara showed up outside my building. She looked worn, like truth had been feeding on her, too. They're building a case, she said. If you cooperate, maybe you can still... Still what? I asked. Breathe. She stepped closer. You can't undo what happened. But you can stop lying. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Do you know what it's like, she continued, to write about the dead and see their families read your words? To see them thank you for exposing what they already knew but couldn't prove? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Tell the truth, Raffy, she said again. Tell it before it's told without you. Then she left. Her scent lingered. Ink, rain, and mercy. That night I opened her old letters. Each one was a fragment of the life I could have had. Softer, slower, almost human. She wrote about forgiveness, about how truth hurts but silence kills. I still believe you can come back, one letter said, but you have to die first. Not your body, but your pride. I folded it carefully, like scripture. For the first time in months, I slept without alcohol. The next morning, I went to the precinct. No one greeted me. The corridors felt longer than before. I walked straight to the chief's office. He was there, relaxed, cigarette between his fingers, smoke curling like a smirk. Raffy, he said. Didn't expect you'd come back. I came to resign. You don't have to. We'll make this go away, same as before. I shook my head. No, this time it's not paperwork. It's blood. He exhaled slowly. You'll ruin yourself. Maybe that's all I have left to ruin. I placed my badge on his desk. The metal clinked against the wood. Soft, final. You taught me how to lie, I said. Now I have to remember how to tell the truth. He didn't stop me. He just watched, as if seeing something die, or maybe something resurrect. Later that day, I met with the investigator again. This time, I confessed everything. Every fake report, every staged photo, every envelope of silence. The words poured out like a flood I'd been holding back for years. When it was over, he looked at me, not with disgust, but with relief. "You'll go to prison for this," he said quietly. "I know." "Why now?" "Because I finally heard the gunshot." He frowned. "What gunshot?" "The one I fired years ago." It's been echoing ever since. The trial didn't make headlines. People had already moved on to newer scandals, fresher heroes. In court, I stood alone. The judge's voice was steady as she read the verdict. Guilty. Falsification, obstruction, misconduct. 6 years. When the gavel hit, the sound felt like a bullet finding its mark. Prison wasn't punishment. It was clarity. The walls were honest. They didn't pretend to be anything else. Every morning I swept floors, cleaned toilets, listened to men tell their crimes like bedtime stories. Some still lied. Most didn't bother anymore. One night, a fellow inmate asked me, "What were you before this?" "A cop." "What are you now?" A man trying to remember why that mattered. He laughed, but not cruelly. In my cell, I kept a single thing, my mother's rosary. Not for prayer, but for counting the nights since the applause stopped. I used to think silence was punishment. Now I know it's medicine. Months later, I received a letter from Lara. "They reopened the boy's case," she wrote. "His family forgave you. They said, at least you told the truth." Forgiveness. A word I didn't deserve, but needed to hear. I whispered it to the ceiling, over and over, until it felt almost real. Sometimes, late at night, when the lights go out and the cell turns into shadow, I imagine the boy I killed. He's sitting beside me, quiet, his chest no longer bleeding. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. We just sit there, two ghosts sharing the same silence. And somewhere beyond the walls, the rain begins again. This time, it sounds like cleansing. In prison, the air doesn't change much. It smells like sweat, metal, and regret. But somewhere between the routine and the silence, time begins to behave differently. Slower, almost merciful. Every morning at 6, the guards shout our names like curses. We line up, count off, eat, clean, wait. The days are numbered not by calendars, but by how many times you remember what you've done. For me, that number is infinite. There's a chapel inside the compound. Small, forgotten, built long before the new walls went up. It's the only place where no one shouts. The first time I went there, I didn't go to pray. I just wanted to sit somewhere the light didn't look artificial. The chaplain, an old man named Padre Noel, sat near the altar, fixing a broken crucifix. His hands trembled, but his eyes didn't. "You're the officer," he said without looking up. "Ex-officer," I corrected. "No one stops being what they were," he smiled faintly. "They just learn the cost of it." He offered me a seat. We didn't talk much. He worked in silence. I sat in it. The broken Christ watched us both. Weeks passed before he spoke again. "You know why most men here are afraid of silence?" he asked one morning. "Because they can't lie to it." "Exactly." He looked at me then, as if seeing something beneath my skin. "And what about you, hijo? What lie are you still keeping?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Then I realized I hadn't said the boy's name since that night. His name was Jericho Cruz, 18, first-time offender. Paid a few pesos to pretend to surrender. He never made it to the camera lights. I whispered it, slowly, like an apology. Jericho. Padre Noel nodded, his voice soft. "Now you can start talking to God." I started visiting the chapel every day, not to pray for freedom, but for memory. I wanted to remember him, not as a headline or a casualty, but as a person I stole from the world. Some nights, I'd light a candle and whisper his name again. It flickered like he was answering. And in that fragile glow, I'd hear echoes, the shouts, the cameras, the applause that used to define me. Only now, they sounded like ghosts rehearsing the past. Lara came once. She looked different, tired, older, but calm. She sat across the glass barrier, hands folded, eyes unreadable. "You look thinner," she said. "I feel lighter." "You told the truth." "Too late." She shook her head. "Late is better than never." Jericho's mother wrote to me. She said she prays for you. I laughed under my breath. She should hate me. She did. Then she forgave you. I stared at her, not knowing whether to cry or collapse. Forgiveness. The word felt impossible, undeserved, holy. "Do you forgive me?" I asked quietly. Lara looked down. "I don't know if that's mine to give. But I stopped hating you a long time ago." When she left, I sat in silence for hours. Outside, the rain started again. Soft, insistent, familiar. Months later, Padre Noel asked me to help with his Sunday service. He said I could read the gospel aloud. The passage was from Luke. "For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." My voice trembled at first. Then it steadied. Every word felt like it was meant for me. Each syllable, a small dismantling of pride. After the service, one of the inmates approached me. He was serving time for robbery, his arms covered in tattoos. "Sir," he said, "you talk like you've been both the thief and the judge." I smiled faintly. Maybe I was both. He nodded. "Then maybe you can teach the rest of us how not to be." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that boy's face, the way his eyes widened before the bullet took him. And for the first time, I prayed, not for myself, but for him. Somewhere between confession and exhaustion, I realized something. The opposite of guilt isn't innocence, it's responsibility. Innocence can't return what you've taken. Responsibility, at least, tries. So I began teaching literacy classes for other inmates. We used old newspapers, torn Bibles, anything with words. I taught them to read, to write their names, to spell words like hope and truth. Sometimes I'd watch their faces light up as they read a full sentence for the first time. And it reminded me of Jericho, how young he'd been, how unspoken his story remained. In a way, I was teaching them what I'd stolen from him, the chance to begin. One afternoon, Padre Noel handed me an envelope. It was addressed to me, written in shaky handwriting. To Captain Mendez, from the Cruz family. My chest tightened. I unfolded it slowly. We have no anger left. The Lord took it. We believe our son forgave you before he died. Please live in a way that makes his life mean something. There was no signature, just a small drawing, a candle beside a name. Jericho. I pressed the paper to my forehead and cried, quietly, until my throat went raw. A few days later, I asked Padre Noel if I could be baptized again. He smiled. You can only be baptized once, hijo. Then let it be a confession, not a ritual. He agreed. That evening, as the sun bled through the chapel windows, I knelt before the basin. He poured water over my head, his voice low and steady. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. But between the two, may you live as truth. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt like the rain outside had finally come in to wash me clean. That night, I dreamt of the boy again. He was standing on a pier, watching the sunrise, the same one I used to watch after raids. But this time, he turned to me. He smiled. Then he said the words I'd been waiting years to hear. It's over, sir. When I woke up, my pillow was wet. But for the first time, it wasn't from guilt. I wrote to Lara the next day. I don't expect redemption. I just want to live truthfully. Tell the boy's family that I light a candle for him every Sunday. Tell them I remember his name. I signed it simply, Raffy. Not captain, not sergeant, just Raffy. I was released on a Wednesday morning. No cameras this time. No journalists waiting by the gate. Just a guard who signed the papers, looked at me, and said, "You can go." 2 words. For 6 years, I'd imagined that moment would feel like freedom. It didn't. Freedom, I realized, isn't the absence of walls. It's the ability to walk straight after living behind them. Outside, Manila had changed. New buildings, new slogans, new uniforms. But the noise, that stayed the same. The city still sold stories of heroes and villains, still applauded the loudest liars. I walked past a billboard with a smiling police officer shaking hands with the mayor. The caption read, "Keeping our city safe." I almost laughed. It sounded like a line I'd written in another life. I didn't go back to my condo. It had been sold years ago. Instead, I took a bus to Cavite, my old neighborhood. The driver didn't recognize me. Good. The streets smelled the same. Fried fish, gasoline, rain on rust. My father was still there, older now, slower. When he opened the door and saw me standing there, he didn't speak. He just stared. At the wrinkles, the graying hair, the man who once wore pride like armor. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. No words, no questions. Just that old, calloused embrace. Warm, trembling, forgiving. "Welcome home, hijo," he whispered. That broke me. We sat outside the house that night, listening to the crickets. He asked about prison, about the food, about how I'd managed to sleep. I told him the truth. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But I learned to breathe again. He nodded. Your mother used to say, when the air feels heavy, breathe slower. God waits. I looked at the small altar by the door, her old photograph beside a candle that never seemed to die out. For the first time, I felt like I could face her. A week later, I found work. Padre Noel had written me a letter of recommendation before I left. A community center in Quezon City needed an assistant for literacy programs. Ex-convicts, out-of-school youth, anyone who wanted a second start. The irony wasn't lost on me. Once I'd erased lives for numbers. Now I was teaching people to count their own names. The first day, the kids looked at me with suspicion. They knew who I was, the killer cop. But I didn't try to defend myself. I just showed up every morning, early, consistent. Little by little, the tension softened. One boy, around Jericho's age, stayed after class once. Sir, he said shyly, why are you teaching us? Because someone taught me what truth costs, I replied. Was it expensive? Too expensive. So I'm trying to pay it back, little by little. He nodded as if he understood. Maybe he did. Some afternoons, when it rains, I still walk to the pier. I stand by the edge, watching the gray horizon blur into the water. Every raindrop feels familiar, like a memory that refuses to leave but doesn't hurt anymore. I think of Jericho sometimes. Not with pain, but with prayer. He lives now in every lesson I teach, every truth I refuse to bend. When I write his name on the blackboard for an exercise, Jericho Cruz, born 2001. I tell the students he was a boy who deserved a better ending. They never ask more, and I never say less. Lara visited once. She was running a small NGO for victims' families. We had coffee under a leaking roof, and it felt like the world had finally quieted down enough to breathe. You look at peace, she said. Peace? I smiled. No, just honest. That's close enough. Before leaving, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo. Jericho's family at a small beach, smiling, holding hands. On the back, written in careful handwriting, "Forgiven means remembered rightly." I carried that photo with me for months, still do. I don't wear my old uniform anymore. But sometimes, when I pass a police checkpoint, I salute the officers. Some salute back, not recognizing me. Others look twice, like they've seen my ghost. Maybe they have. The city no longer claps for me, and thank God for that. Because silence, I've learned, is the truest kind of applause. The kind that doesn't perform, the kind that listens. At night, before bed, I light a candle beside my window. The wax drips slowly, the flame small but steady. I whisper one name, always the same. Jericho. And then, after a long pause, thank you. The room fills with the quiet rhythm of my breathing. Outside, the rain begins again. This time, it doesn't sound like guilt. It sounds like peace.